Resourceful Designer, episode 276, Tarnished Reputation.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He can't decide if it's the sneezing, the runny nose, or the itchy eyes that he hates most about having allergies. Mark Descout.
Yeah, the only good thing about the pandemic, staying at home and wearing masks, is that my allergies were not as bad this year as they have been in the past. Oh well, you have to look for the silver linings in life. In this week's podcast, I'm going to share a story with you, something that I'm hoping you'll understand the message from. But before I get to that, I just want to remind you that the Resourceful Designer community is closed. Now, I'm not going to give you a big long spiel about the community. I'm just going to let you know that if you are interested in joining, if you do want to join this great community of like-minded designers, a peer group where you can bounce ideas off of, have accountability partners, and just be friends with people who understand what you're going through, if that's something that interests you, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/community and sign up to be notified when membership reopens. And now, Tarnished Reputation. I want to tell you a story, and this story has nothing to do with graphic or web design, but it does have a relevance to running a business, and I'll tie that into running a design business if you stick around to the end. We built our house, or our home, in 2005. Or more accurately, we had someone build our home for us. Now, if you've ever built your own home, or if you know anyone who has, you know that it's a long and grueling process. You see, when you buy a pre-built home, you basically get what's there. Sure, you can renovate it, remodel it, and all that stuff, but what you're actually buying is what you get. What you do with it after the fact, that's up to you. But when you build your home, you're starting with a blank slate. Think of it as opening a new document in Photoshop, Illustrator, or InDesign, or starting with a fresh installation of WordPress. What you do with it is entirely up to you. Well, building a home is kind of like that. Besides the actual plan, the layout of the home, you get to choose how many rooms there are and the size of each of those rooms. You also get to choose things like the flooring. Do you want tile? Do you want wood? Do you want carpet? What lighting fixtures do you want to appear in every room? What about the plumbing? There are lots of different toilets or faucets and things that you can choose from. And then there's the windows and the doors and the coloring, the paint on the wall, the cabinetry, the whole bit. You get to decide everything that goes into your house. Well, my wife and I did that when we started the process for ours. We spent months going through catalogs and just looking up different ideas until we settled on each little aspect of the house to be exactly how we wanted it. Now, one of those aspects that we had to choose were the shingles on the roof. Now, it sounds simple enough, but in fact, there are thousands of varieties and colors of shingles that you can select from. So my wife and I took many drives around town to all sorts of different neighborhoods, looking at roofs and trying to match those that we liked with the samples that our contractor had supplied us. In the end, we chose a nice brownish multi-hued asphalt shingle that we thought went really well with our brick and gave our home some nice character. And we loved it. When our home was finished, we thought it looked great. Well, a couple of years ago, we started to notice these little grain-like substances appearing on our back deck. At first, we thought it was some sort of dirt and just kind of broomed it off and didn't think much of it. But we soon realized that it was actually debris falling from our shingles. Now, there wasn't a whole lot of it, so we kind of shrugged it off and thought, that's a little peculiar. But then last summer, this debris that was falling started getting bigger, and it was falling more often to the point where every other day we'd have to broom off the deck. And when we looked up at our roof, we noticed that the shingles were starting to turn up at the corners, which they're not supposed to do. They're supposed to lay flat. Well, we weren't happy about this, but we really didn't know what we could do about it. so we just let it go as a nuisance. Well, this spring, when the snow melted, we were shocked to see a layer of dark brown debris on our deck that had fallen over the course of the winter. And our shingles, when we looked up, were curved and cracked much more than the summer before. Now, I can't believe it took me that long to realize that something wasn't right, but I finally decided to take action. Now, not really knowing where to start, I decided to call the contractor who built our house. And when I explained the situation to him, he knew immediately what I was talking about. In fact, he had been dealing with several other clients of his, prior clients, facing the exact same problem. It turns out that the shingles that were used on my house and many other houses back then had a defect, a big enough one that there was a class action lawsuit that was filed and won against the manufacturer. So the good news was that our shingles, since they had a 25-year warranty, we were entitled to a refund for the remaining life of the shingles, as long as we had them replaced with a newer shingle by the same manufacturer. That was the deal with the class action suit. We can get reimbursed for the time the shingles were not used, so from now till the end of the warranty, as long as we replace them with shingles by the same manufacturer. Now, I must admit I was a little upset that I hadn't looked into this issue sooner when we first discovered the issue, because I could have got a little bit more money left because there would have been more years on the warranty. But I was still glad that there was something we can do and it wouldn't cost me the full amount to replace our roof. Now, not really knowing how to proceed, I've never actually replaced a roof before or gone through the process, I asked the contractor for advice. Now, he had retired several years ago, so he wasn't really in this business anymore, but he gave me the name of a contractor he recommended. And he had all sorts of praise for this guy and how good he was and how precise he was and how he would go above and beyond for his clients. And he told me to contact him if I needed a quote on redoing my roof. Now, my contractor also recommended that I talk to his old foreman, the guy that he hired to oversee most of the homes that he built. And the guy, I actually remember dealing with him when they were building our house. For a lot of the day-to-day stuff, when my wife and I would come visit, it was him that we were dealing with. And I remember the guy being really good, and he helped us out so much whenever we were trying to think of different things, and that he was a huge help. So, really good guy. So I called him for advice, and it turns out that he also happens to be retired, although he just recently retired last year. And he told me that he also had filed many of these shingle claims on behalf of past clients. And although he's no longer doing that anymore now that he's retired, he would help me any way that he could. Now, he also recommended a contractor, the same guy that my contractor had recommended, that I could get a quote from. Now, he told me that I needed to get a quote before I could submit the claim because I needed to know exactly how many shingles and all the material that would be used and an overall price for the job. Now, he told me that this new contractor was somebody that he had actually worked with on several projects after the contractor who built my house, after he retired and the foreman went out on his own. He worked with this new contract on several projects, and he highly recommended this person. In fact, he told me that this new contractor was the one building his home for him that was under construction as we spoke. So having received the same name from two trusted sources, I called the contractor and left him a message to call me back. Now, while waiting to hear back from him, I decided to look him up online. I had never heard of him before, and not that I know all the contractors in the area, but I looked him up. And I have to say the Google reviews and the other reviews I found on various websites, they said nothing but good things about him. Everybody had all sorts of praise about the amazing work and the attention to detail he had. And I was very eager to get this whole process going. But for some reason, he wasn't returning my call. So a few days later, I called and left another message. And then a few days after that, I called and left another. Finally, a week after my first call, he called me back apologizing. He told me that the pandemic had taken a toll on his business and he had just lost an entire crew of workers. And he had been so busy juggling things the past week that he just never had a moment to call me back. Well, I guess this could be understandable. You listen to the news and it's full of businesses suffering due to staff shortages these days. So I just let it pass. Now, I explained to him what I needed, and he was familiar with this whole class action suit. He had replaced shingles on other places that had a similar thing. and he told me that he would stop by the next day to look at my roof. But he didn't show up. So 2 days later, I called once again, and he apologized, saying he would be there the next day. Now, to his credit, he did show up the next day, and he spent almost an hour on my roof measuring it, as well as taking photos of all the problem areas for me to submit with the claim, because the claim needed photos to see it. So once done, he said that he would send me the photos and have a quote ready to me by the end of the week, which was just a few days away. Now, my wife and I are also thinking about adding a screened off area, kind of a porch, to our back deck. There's a lot of bugs, mosquitoes, and such during the summer, and it would really be nice to be able to sit out on the deck and not have to worry about it. So a nice screened in area. So I asked him if that was something he'd like to quote on, to which he eagerly agreed. He said, yeah, I've done many of those before, and he would provide me a cost as a separate quote at the same time. But the end of the week came, and I didn't hear from him. So I waited until Wednesday the following week before calling. Once again, he apologized and told me he would send me the 2 quotes by Friday. Are you seeing a pattern here? Well, on Monday, when I called him asking where my quotes were, he told me he couldn't find my email address in order to send them to me, and had been meaning to call me and ask for it. This is something I'd already given him before. So I gave him my email address again, and finally, the following day, I received the photos and the quote for my roof. The second quote I had asked for was nowhere to be seen. Now back to the roof claim. I filled out all the information. It's an online portal, luckily, and I filled out all the questionnaire that they needed to submit my claim, including a list of the inventory, the materials that the contractor would need in order to do the job, the estimated quote that he had taken, as well as the photos that he had taken of all the various areas. Now, upon submission, it told me that it could take up to 120 days before I get a response. And in the meantime, no work was to be performed on the roof. This is in case that the claims people need to send an inspector to look at the roof. They couldn't really do that if I had already had it repaired, so I had to wait till the claim was approved before I can actually have my roof repaired. So I called the contractor and I told him that we couldn't move forward for possibly up to 120 days. Now, he told me he was familiar with that from previous claims, he understood, but not to worry. So I told him I'd like to book him for the job, and when the time came, he would be able to do it. And he said that wouldn't be an issue. He'd just pencil me onto a schedule for the fall, and to let him know as soon as I hear about the claim. Now, at this time, I also reminded him that he owed me another quote for the screen porch on the back deck, to which he said that, yeah, I'll get that to you really soon. Now, you may be thinking, Mark, this guy doesn't seem very reliable. Why not get somebody else instead? Well, during the process, I actually did get a couple of other quotes from random roofers. These are people, one of them was somebody that had done a neighbor's place that I'd seen their truck. And the other one was somebody I just Googled online for roofers in the area, and I picked one name and called them. Well, both of these places were more expensive than this guy, that contractor that had been recommended to me. And looking at their online reviews, they weren't really as good as this first guy's. I couldn't find very many bad reviews on this first guy, but these other ones, I got quite a few bad reviews that kind of gave me a leery feeling about dealing with them. And the one that had done my neighbor's place after he had quoted for my roof, I went and talked to my neighbor, and he told me that, it's not really somebody he would recommend. He says he's kind of happy with the job, but he doesn't think he'd ever hire that guy again, which didn't leave a good feeling for me. Not to mention that both of them had told me because of the 120-day time frame where we would have to wait, neither of them would guarantee that they can do my roof before the winter came. Whereas the first guy told me that he'd pencil it in and there'd be no problem. Now, true to form, it took exactly 120 days before I heard back that my claim had been approved, and I can move forward with my roof repair. Yay! Well, I immediately called the contractor and left him a message saying, hey, we're good to go. And then I waited. 3 days later, I called and left another message. And I waited. Now, I'm starting to get worried here. Winter is fast approaching here in Eastern Ontario. And once the snow starts falling, not many people are going to be doing roof work. And at this point, my roof has deteriorated significantly over the past summer to the point where I don't really trust it. For the winter with the snow and the melting, I'm sure that we'd end up with water damage at this point. There's just too many cracks and broken shingles and stuff. And I really need this job done. So finally, a few days later, he calls me, once again apologizing, and tells me not to worry. He still has me on his schedule, and my roof will be done before winter. Now, the next step of the process is for him to drop off shingle samples for us to choose from, which is something I don't know why he never dropped them off during the 120 days, and I never thought to ask for him, but now that we finally got the approval, he says he's going to drop off the samples for us to pick a shingle. And he would be by later that afternoon. Well, he never showed up. On Monday, this past week, I called him again, and he apologized and said, I'll drop them off on Tuesday morning before I go to this other house that I'm working on. I'll drop them off at your place. Again, he never showed up. Well, today is Friday. I still don't have the shingle samples. And I don't know when he's going to do my roof. Even though he tells me not to worry about it, that it'll be done. But I'm still worried. There's nobody else I can call at this point. I have to rely on this person, even though I've lost all faith in him. Now, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that my roof gets repaired before snowfall. But I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't. So why did I share this story with you? A story about my roof that has nothing to do with graphic or web design or running your design business? It's because I wanted to share with you how not to run a business. I had two people that I trust, the contractor who built my house, great guy, and the foreman that I really enjoyed working with. Both recommend, and not just recommend, highly praise this guy. And his online reviews, as I said, when I looked for him, they were great reviews. So I had no reason to suspect the frustrations I would experience dealing with him. But over the past few months, my opinion has changed. And at this point, he could do the most amazing job on my roof. And even if he offered me a discount because of all the troubles we've gone through, I would still never recommend him to somebody else. As far as I'm concerned, my dealings with him have tarnished his reputation beyond repair in my eyes. And that's the message I want you to take away from this. It doesn't matter what sort of work you do for your client. What matters is how you treat them. You may be a great designer. Heck, you may be an amazing designer. But never forget that you are not the only designer around. When a client calls you or emails you, make sure you reply in a timely manner. Even if it's just to say, thank you for the message, I'll get back to you. That way they know you at least received it, and they're not sitting there wondering at the other end if their email disappeared into the ether. That simple acknowledgement that you received their message can go a long way in building trust between you and the client. And if they ask you to do something or to send them something, make sure you follow through in a timely manner. If you're afraid that you may forget to do something, set yourself a reminder on your phone. Add it to your calendar. Add it to your to-do list. Stick a Post-it note on your monitor, whatever it takes for you to remember to follow through. You want to be building lasting relationships with your clients so that they come back to you again and again and again in the future. And you'll never be able to do that if your reputation is tarnished because of bad dealings with the client. It doesn't matter what sort of designs you create, how amazing they are, and how much they benefit the client. If they don't like dealing with you, chances are they'll find somebody else to deal with in the future. Because once you lose trust in someone, it's almost impossible to gain it back. You won't believe this. Right as I was about to wrap up this episode, the contractor actually showed up my door with the shingle samples. I had to press pause on the recording to go answer the door right now. And he didn't even apologize for being late or anything. He just handed me the shingles. He did assure me that my roof will be done on the 4th week of November. So that's the most precise he's been with me. Well, I guess not. He has told me that he'll drop something off on the Friday and that he'll be there on the Tuesday, and he never showed up. So right now he's telling me the 4th week of November, which is cutting it darn close with the winter around here, that my roof will be done. And he says that it's on his schedule and I shouldn't worry. But you know what? I'm going to worry anyways, at least until the work is finally done. And as for the screened-in extension for our deck in the back, I still never saw a quote from that, and I'm not going to bother asking for it anymore. Because once my roof is done, I never plan on hiring this guy again. I don't care how much praise I heard from other people and how great the online reviews are. In my eyes, this guy's not somebody worth dealing with. And I hope that none of your clients ever feel that way about you. But it's under your control. You're the one that determines your reputation as far as your clients are concerned. And that's all I want to say about this. So thank you very much for tuning in. I am Mark Decote, wishing you all the best with your design business and hoping that your reputation is never tarnished. And you can keep working over and over again with your clients. So take care and stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.